I am so excited to be joining you today. My name is Alice. I am one of the Associate Law School Consultants at Montgomery Consulting, and I am thrilled to be joined today by one of my very good friends and one of my favorite colleagues, Jimmi Nicholson. She is the Director of Admissions at the University of Kentucky's J. David Rosenberg College of Law, and we're going to be talking about a lot of different things today. What is the right law school for you? What are the things that you need to know as an applicant? We are going to be taking advantage of all of the expertise that Jimmi has and that she is willing to share today.
Hello there. Jimmi Nicholson. I currently serve as the Director of Admissions here at the University of Kentucky, J. David Rosenberg College of Law. I am in my 6th year here at the College of Law. I am native of New Orleans, Louisiana, but received my formal education at a little small school in Wisconsin, University of Wisconsin Parkside, and did my graduate work at Illinois State University. Worked at Ohio State for about 15 years, started in student affairs, then on to the law school there for about 11 years, and then coming over here to UK. And during this time, I have been involved in a myriad of leadership roles and experiences. But the thing I think is most important as related to law school is that I help co-found the annual meeting of law school diversity professionals, which is currently in its 15th year.
So I always ask this question because honestly, I thought being an admissions officer was one of the most fun jobs. What's your favorite thing about working with law school applicants?
So my favorite part is I think I really enjoy meeting students who are interested in pursuing their legal education and helping them navigate their way through the admission cycle. While I would love for everybody to enroll at my school, I know they all will not for whatever reason, but I'm happy to be a part of the journey and love when I see people reach the goal. And I'm all about it, and I like advocating for students and cheering them on and let them know that they cannot quit. Even if it doesn't happen for the first time, you reapply, you get back on your horse. I live in Kentucky now, so I make a lot of horse analogies. And off you go. You can't let the process defeat you. So I think that's the most enjoyable part of. I often tell people if I can describe my job, I would say, depending on the student, either I am a dream maker or a nightmare maker. But I love the first part being identified as a dream maker.
So I used to work at University of Kentucky's law school for a bit, and it was my first time working at a large state school as an actual, real adult. And one of the things that I noticed, especially with schools like the University of Kentucky, I think Ohio State is probably the same way, that those big state schools, those big campuses, they have these traditions or just weird things that are just they're common on the campus and nobody thinks anything about it, but coming in and not knowing the history or the background, it's just kind of huh. So I'd love to hear about both schools, but what is your favorite or the strangest one of these big school traditions from UK and from Ohio State?
It's funny because UK and Ohio State, while both are large flagship state universities, there are some differences between the two. And it kind of saddens me that the UK, while we have traditions here, is not steeped and rooted and vast as it is at Ohio State. I mean, they have a lot more traditions than we do here, but there are great things about each institution. So my favorite tradition, I share one from each institution. My favorite tradition from Ohio State is, if you've ever been to Ohio State, they don't have a quad, they have an oval. And so at each end of the oval, there's a shield. So when students, if you go there with your beau, your loved one, your partner, and you hold hands at one shield and manage to keep holding them all the way to the next shield, you are destined to be together forever, and they call that the long walk. So that is a cute romantic thing that they do at Ohio State that I think is really cute. Here at UK, I'm going to talk about one that I started here at the law school. Um, I'm very happy that over the past 3 or 4 years, we conclude each orientation period with a pinning ceremony. This pinning ceremony is very important. It's a time to congratulate the students. As you know, Alice, orientation in law school is not like rah rah rah, let's hang out. It's very intense. That they made it through orientation. It's a time that their parents can be here and see them officially be welcomed into the profession. And it's a time that they get to hear from prestigious alumni and faculty, and sometimes the president of the university, and then receive this beautiful lapel pin, which I have one today, from the dean of the law school, officially welcoming them into the profession, and they will take an oath of that.
I love that. Orientation can really be a sprint sometimes. So what I noticed when I worked at UK and when I was working at West Virginia University's law school is that I always got a lot of questions from applicants about resident preference on our application, or, if it made a difference in the decision, or whether or not somebody was going to get accepted if they were a resident more likely. So I'd love to hear your answer and how you would explain this to applicants.
Sure. So I don't know if things are the same or different from your time at UK, but I will say now the UK process isn't different from the Ohio State process. We do not have a requisite on the number of residents we must have in the class, but I will say there are times that residents are given preference over non-residents in the review process. And that's only because we know we're more likely to yield a resident than a non-resident. So, and that preference may come in some leniency when it comes to LSAT or GPA, which may be extreme outliers. That we've never typically admitted someone with that particular profile, or we may be, each law school admissions office has some type of yield analysis that they're working with that kind of is like a matrix that tells us we got to admit so many students to yield an entering class of whatever X amount. Is not a crystal ball, but it helps guide us along the way. So sometimes we may admit a few more residents when the models say we cannot admit anybody else, but we're like, okay, these are residents, we really want them here. And then I would say, here in Kentucky, and I would say the same thing in Ohio. There's a fondness from students from the Appalachian region that we don't give them preference, but we're happy to see them in the pool, and we want to admit as many of those students as we possibly can. With on the non-resident side, if you are a non-resident applying to a state school that's out of state for you, sometimes you just have no idea why you're trying to come to our school because you haven't communicated it well in your personal statement or in your addendums or other additional essays. And because we're not seeing the connection, and there may be some things we're not particularly impressed with in the file, we're not eager or trying to make a reason to admit you, at that point, because we can't figure out the connection to why you're interested in coming to Kentucky or even Ohio in that case. I will tell you one of the biggest differences between the Ohio State pool and the UK pool is that the Ohio State pool is double, almost triple the size of the UK pool. So here at UK, we're able to lay eyes, as Miss Alice will tell you, on every last application. And because we're able to lay eyes on every last application, that means there are going to be some people who will get admitted that will typically may not get admitted in other people's pool, such as when you're in a bigger pool like Ohio State, there's no way that they're looking, and I will say that firsthand, that eyes are being laid on every last application. So those schools with larger pools are sometimes or oftentimes will have a presumptive admit and or a presumptive deny process. So
Love that. And yes, that was one of my favorite parts of working at schools that had sort of the not super large applicant pools. Well, they really did. I got to read every application that came in and ask, get to know these applicants before they show up, which is great. So one of the things that you had touched on when you talked a little bit about your background is that you've done a lot of work with diversity, equity, and inclusion in the legal education field. Um, can you tell us a little bit more about that? And honestly, what I really want to know, and what I really love to hear, and I'm sure our applicants want to know, is legal education making progress? Is it getting better?
Um, some may say I'm naive, but I think it is getting better in some regards, right? I think we are seeing larger applicant pools of diverse individuals, especially during the pandemic, because what was going on in the world, and particularly here in the US, around issues involving social justice, right? That pushed a lot of individuals into want to attain a legal degree. But there are still barriers still there in terms of diverse applicants and their enrollment into law schools. And then that pool fluctuates each year, right? So some years we can be on in an increase, and some years there can be a decrease. But it doesn't matter what every year, the increase year or a decrease year, that is still a relatively very, very small pool. And while we would like to see more racial ethnic minorities, because I'm assuming that's who you're talking about in this question, in our law school, in our law schools across the country. When you are at a law school in the interior, like Kentucky, like well, maybe Tennessee, or it's a lot harder to attract diverse students because one in our states really aren't large diverse populations, and then you need those students to go to college and obtain a degree, right? So that means a lot of our diverse students are coming from out of state, and there's a lot of stigmas that have to be debunked about coming to a place like Ohio or Kentucky or Indiana or Wisconsin, you know what I mean? Being someone of color. So, what I would say to students of color who are looking at law schools, try not to restrict. Because what me and Miss Alice will tell you when we're on the road recruiting, especially she's been in Kentucky and West Virginia. You have a lot of people say, "Yeah, no, I'm not trying to go to Kentucky," or "Yeah, no, I'm not trying to go to West Virginia." But actually, coming to Kentucky or West Virginia may be a good environment and a good setting for you to thrive and reach the goal at the end of the day. I'm not saying you shouldn't look at your home states or law schools that are in your own cities. I'm just saying you should be a little bit more open to where you're willing to travel to for law school.
It's true. I still remember times when I'd be behind my table and have my little banner out, and they'd see my flying WVU, and they would just look and they'd shake their head and then walk away. Not even stop and talk to
it's
me.
it's funny because I kind of get that. I never really got it with Ohio State, but with Kentucky, I do get some shock with some people when they see this little brown face behind the table, like, oh wow, this someone of color in Kentucky? Yes, yes, ma'am, yes,
Mm-hmm.
sir. Because actually, the University of Kentucky has made great strides and efforts across the board. Not only in their graduate and professional school enrollment, but even on the undergraduate side.
Mm-hmm.
And the city of Lexington is just blossoming. And and Lexington is a pretty liberal place in Kentucky. Actually,
I
we're
loved
the
living there.
first city in the state to have an openly gay mayor. It's pretty progressive here in Lexington,
Mm-hmm.
and you really wouldn't know that unless you know from people are from Lexington, or you have really spent some time in Lexington, Kentucky. And just like I had to do when I was in Ohio, I had to let people know I'm not in the middle of a cornfield. There's actually a city here and an airport and things to do, right? So,
I remember I had that conversation a lot. No, there really is a lot to do. We're not just in the middle of a forest. I
mhm,
promise. There's a
mhm,
real city here. You won't be bored. Um, so my next question. It's been a wild couple of years in
yes,
admissions,
it has.
like a wild couple of years. And as this last 2021-2022 cycle is kind of winding down, your classes are starting to get set and we're gearing up for the next year. What's the most interesting thing that you have seen? What's the most interesting trend that has come from this admission cycle
Well,
to
I would
you?
say this trend has been consistent over the past couple emission
Mm-hmm.
cycle as I see more and more of it, and I quite don't know how I feel about it. And Miss Alice, you know where I'm about to go with this response. Um, I'm going to use the term that applicants will use, which is an actually incorrect term, and I will tell you why it's incorrect. Um, and that is that of scholarship negotiations. This has been an increased thing at law schools. I think even more so this cycle than any other cycle that I've been in, when it comes to asking for more scholarship dollars. And then years ago, this was primarily driven by white males asking for more money in scholarships, but now it's across the board at this point. So everybody's asking, and it's not necessarily a bad thing. And the reason why I say it's an incorrect term because you're not negotiating with these schools. If you look up the definition of negotiation in the dictionary, you will see that uh, you're not gonna come to us with a number, and then we're gonna give you a number, and then you're gonna come back to us with a counter. That's not what's happening here. So typically, students will ask about more money, and then we either gonna say yes or no, and then if we say yes, we're gonna give you amount, and that's it, right? So there's no backward and forwarding, on that. The thing about these processes is that as applicants, you have to recognize a few things. So one, you want to drop that term negotiation, and if you're going to approach a law school about it, you probably want to say, I am asking for my scholarship to be reevaluated or reconsidered, because that's the more appropriate term, not negotiated. Secondly, you should never approach a school about increased scholarship if you don't plan on enrolling there, period. Right? Um, and thirdly, you should not ask for it without doing some research and some math on your own. Because oftentimes, what will happen is they'll say, yes, I got admitted at um, X law school, and they gave me $55,000 a year. And your law school, University of Kentucky, only gave me $12,000 a year. So you have to ask yourself, what is the at cost, not tuition and fees? What is the at cost at that university? Each school lists an at cost budget, and so at cost at that school that's costing you 55,000 a year, at cost could be 90,000, right? Whereas at cost at UK can be 42,000. And then once you do the math, you realize that percentage is the exact same. So they're giving you a 30% what we call discount rate, and we're giving you a 30% discount rate. So essentially, it's the same scholarship. And also, you have to look at the stipulations on the scholarship. So, what is that school asks you to maintain that scholarship? I feel, and I think Miss Alice would agree with me, any school that asks for anything more than good academic standing or a 2.3 GPA to maintain that scholarship, I feel like you have a 50-50 shot on keeping that scholarship. So there's a good possibility that you may lose that scholarship. So if there is a high stipulation on that scholarship, the next question which should be, what is the attrition on scholarships? And that will tell you what is your chances of keeping. If they say attrition on scholarships is 30%, right? That's a large amount of individuals losing their scholarship, every year. So those are some things you have to look. So you have to compare apples to apples, oranges to oranges. You have to do all of that before you ever send us an email asking for more money. And then the email needs to be very humble. And while we understand debt is real, and everybody is concerned about going into debt, you also have to recognize law schools have finite budgets, and that budget is going to differ school to school. So you maybe get more money at school A simply because they have a larger budget, right? Versus law school B. But more than likely, you're getting more money in law school A because your credentials in that pool is stronger than the credentials in law school B. So you have to take, and a good place to look for that is that every school posts their consumer information report. And in that report, which we often refer to as a 509 report, in that report, you can see the scholarship breakdown. So, like, what was the average or median scholarship? It gives you the profiles of the students, and you can kind of see where you fall along that range. And then your scholarship dollars should make a lot more sense to you. So, make sure you do a little bit of homework. Be very humble in your approach and read what the scholarship agreement is saying to you, because in our scholarship agreement, we clearly state we do not do scholarship reconsiderations, negotiations, whatever term you want to use. And so if that is stated in the scholarship agreement form, you might want to send us an email about asking for money. The only reason we list the stipulations why we will increase it. Like if you had an increase in LSAT score, if you had an increase in GPA from when you were initially reviewed for scholarships. So debt is real. Definitely be concerned about it. Lots of great resources out there to help you manage your debt. Access Lex, ACCESSLEX.org is a great tool to use. They have a calculator on there, and they have a very rich, robust outside scholarship website, which is better than mine. So I always tell students who are looking for outside scholarships to just go to the website. Don't even bother with the UK one, because you may have to do a little bit more work, right? So you may get your university granted scholarships, then you may have to apply for some outside scholarships as well to help keep your debt low. But the number one reason students go in debt, and Miss Alice will agree with you, is that typically they're not paying attention to the full budget. I think students pick law schools in very expensive locations where the rent is high, and you have to figure out how you're going to pay for that. But also, some students like to live like lawyers as students. So when they graduate from law school, they're living like students versus lawyers because they're in so much debt. But there are great resources out there to help you manage that debt.
So what I'm hoping for is the next cycle, you're going to get all these emails, still asking for more money, but they're going to use reconsideration or reevaluation this
I
time.
hope so.
So they at least
And then
they at
make
least
sure
take
you
one
just
thing
check
away.
with the school if they
Mhm.
even do that, you know?
Sure.
So
More schools I think now are being pretty upfront if they aren't going to work with you, or they're specific like you guys are at UK, and you're like, these are the reasons we will readjust your scholarship
yeah, I think
if you don't
years
have a
ago
thing.
when this first started happening, it was like the wild, wild west. Uh,
Yep.
but now some schools are like, yeah, no, we're not playing that game, because what some applicants fail to realize that the law school admissions world is a small, close knit world, and we know when students are just trying to pit schools against each other. It's very transparent. It may not seem as transparent to the applicant, but we know as admissions people. And then also, we have gotten more savvy. Like, if we're going to do it, these are the stipulations that we're going to apply to it, right? So, and I will tell you, when you are asking for these reevaluations, whatever you get is not going to be a significant amount of money. So, if you were originally awarded $12,000, at most that increase is only going to be from a couple $100 to maybe about $3,000 at most. I would say no more than five. So that may be very significant to some students, but when you look at the grand scheme of things, $5,000 in a budget really, and especially if you're taking out loans, um, yeah, that's an extra $10 a month to the loan payment, maybe. So yeah.
Look, those student loans are no joke, man.
No joke. And I
They are
am
no
very
joke.
blessed and thankful that I have managed to pay mine off.
Y'all saw me raise my hand earlier. I was one of those who didn't read the forms. I just said, "Give me all that money." Um, Now I deal with
Well,
it.
it's funny because this is what I see, and you can agree with me or disagree with me on this, Miss Alice, is that 1L year, people are scared to death to take out the loans. But usually the loan is going to be that gap filler that you need, since you're not eligible to work. That first, if you're choosing a full time only program, you're going to have to ask for permission to work. And if you do get permission to work, it's only for 20 hours a week, and it has to be something simple like blogging or something like that, right? Um,
Blogging sometimes
then
hard.
second year, They're more hip to the process. You've likely had a summer internship that was very lucrative. You may have been able to keep that during the academic year. So you're not as afraid of taking out the loans, but you know the amount that you need to fill the gap. So you're going to take out that amount to fill the gap. But third year, you're like, give me everything you got, right? Because third
I
year, you're
just want to
like,
get through.
I got to pay for the MPRE. I got to pay for the bar exam. I got to pay for bar prep. Hey, I'm likely not going to be working while I'm doing bar prep. So how I'm going to pay these bills? How I'm going to eat? So you're like, yeah, I need every dollar that I can get, right? Come third year. So
That was my mentality all 3 years, which was not, in retrospect, a great idea. But we all learn from my mistakes. Um,
well, hey, you know, as I say, a legal degree is an investment in the future.
it's true.
You're probably better off for it, and you will eventually get to a point where you can pay off these loans. Come on, Biden and loan forgiveness.
We can hope for it, man.
Yes.
So I mentioned the cycle's winding down, and you talked a little bit about 509 reports, which is great. Those are one of my favorite things. And it is always surprising to me how little applicants utilize them until someone like an admissions officer is like, oh, hey, there's this thing that's really helpful. And every law school has one. But in that sort of that law school search process, how do you advise students to start? Or, if you could tell someone who hasn't found their way to you yet, what would you tell them to start with?
Well, it depends on where they're at in the process. So I think the most apt time to start considering law school is sophomore year, because applying to law school is all about your junior year. Definitely, if that's the case, if you are coming directly out of undergrad, right? Because your senior year of college is your applicant year. So if you are a sophomore or younger, considering law school, I would just start by visiting the law school that is closest to you. It doesn't have to be, you don't even have to want to go there, right? But I would say visit it, um, talk to the admissions office, talk to some students, sit in the class. And the reason why I say do that is because it's going to help you really start to think about, do I really want to do this thing, right? Because I think some people are not realistic about the demands of law school. And as you talk to more law school students and you sit in law school classes, you'll determine if this is something that you want to do. And if you are a sophomore and younger, I would also encourage you to get some type of legal internship, because getting your feet wet just by sticking your little tippy toe in the water is also going to help you determine if this is really something that you want to do, because it'll give you a snapshot of one career path in law. The good thing about a legal degree is that it is a generalist degree and not a specialist degree. So you can take this and do virtually anything with it. So while that summer internship that you're doing may be in personal injury, right? And you may find out, yeah, I don't like anything about personal injury, and figure out you're more passionate about real estate. You can go do that, right? So, but at least it kind of gives you a snapshot of what it's like to practice, in that field. So that's what I would do first. Is just visiting law schools, talking to law school students, and meeting with admissions officers if you're early in the process. If you are later in the process, junior or senior, getting ready to apply, you really got to narrow down some things. As you know, if you are a junior right now who wants to come to law school, fall of 2023, um, next month you should be taking the LSAT if you haven't done so already. If you don't take it next month, I mean, what is the next one? October?
I think there's one in August this year.
Okay, so August or October, you should be taking one of those. Applying to law school is all about early bird gets the worm. So law schools do what's called rolling admissions. So when our applications open up in August or September, once we get critical mass of applicants, we start reviewing files and making admissions decisions. So what that means as an applicant is that What looks good to us in September and October may not look good to us in November or December, right? So you have more chances for admissions the earlier you apply, and more chances for a competitive scholarship the earlier you apply. Got to watch the dates and deadlines on the individual applications, but that's what I would do. So if you are getting ready to apply to law school and you've already taken your LSAT, um, a lot of people wait to last minute to do the personal statement. In fact, personal statement and recommendations are going to be the two hardest things you do outside of the LSAT in this process. So if you've already taken your LSAT, those are the next two things I will be working on. Filling out the application itself is easy. Uploading your transcripts and doing that's all easy. You're going to have to do multiple drafts of that personal statement before you have a polished piece that you're going to be satisfied with. And with your recommenders, you're gonna have an A pool and a B pool because this is all time sensitive. And so why I say A pool and a B pool, like so you're like your A pool is like your top picks, right? These are the people that you want to really do your recommendation. But sometimes some of your top picks may be lazy. So if your deadline to yourself is to have all your applications in by December 1st, and you check in with your recommenders on October 31st, and that person still hasn't done it, then that means you move into your B pool candidate because they make you get it in more timely because your file will not be reviewed until every last piece that is required of it is in. So that makes it very, very time sensitive.
That I can't tell you how many students that I saw that would walk into my office when I was still working in law schools in like February, telling me how excited they are to apply to go to law school next fall. And I was like, you're too late. You can't start this in February, man. You're too late.
Well, students get denied for all types of reasons. A lot of people think they are getting denied based off of their credentials, but that's not always true. And this is why I'm going to circle back to a personal statement. Sometimes we deny people because it's just a horribly written personal statement. And the number one thing you're going to do as a lawyer is write. And so that personal statement is helping us assess who you are, your fit with us, and do you have, as I said, the tools in your toolbox to be able to grasp legal writing when we teach it to you as a law student. Because we can't teach you how to write once you're here. Either you have it or you don't, right? Or, people will get denied because they I just shared this with my best friend is driving from Florida to Cleveland today with her husband because his daughter is graduating from medical school at Case Western, and so they stopped over in Lexington. And she asked me about my class, and I just told her I just denied a man that had great credentials, but his essay was all about how great South Carolina was. So I'm like, well, you can go to South Carolina. It's just that simple. So there's all types of little quirky things. Or you didn't follow the rules when it came to letters of recommendations, where we say clearly submit to from faculty or whomever, and who it cannot be, and one of your two is from a personal friend. That does not qualify, right? So, or it could have been from a faculty member and they didn't like you. Or they did not write enough about you because oftentimes you're going to waive your right to see this thing. One of the things that students don't do, they just go up to their faculty member to be like, yeah, Dr. Foley, yeah, Professor Foley, I want to go to law school. Can you write me a letter of recommendation? And Professor Foley is probably going to say, sure, yeah, why not, right? When it should be, and they're doing that after class, when the whole asks should be done differently. You should be sending your faculty member an email, asking a time to talk with them about going to law school. And then once you meet with that person, you want to talk to them about why you want to go to law school. And then at the end of that conversation, be like, can you please write me a positive letter of recommendation? By just putting in that keyword positive is going to give Professor Foley a pause, because Professor Foley is going to think about, do I like you? Were you a good student? Can I write a positive letter of recommendation, right? And if they feel like they cannot write a positive letter of recommendation, they're likely not going to submit that letter of recommendation. So, and if you are applying to a school that's your alma mater, right? So if you went to West Virginia for undergrad and now you're applying to the law school, your faculty members, we know their good letters and we know their form letters, right? Because we see tons of them. So you need, you need a good balance, there. So yeah.
That's true. I tell stories all the time now about a faculty recommender that we saw pretty regularly, where three-quarters of the letter was why the professor was qualified to write the letter, and then I'd get about this much about my student, and it's like, pick somebody else. Pick somebody else.
Well, I often feel, let me see if you're going to answer it the same way. Who do you think are the worst people to write letters?
I'm thinking back through the weirdest and worst ones I've seen, and parents are definitely the worst in my book.
Okay. So other attorneys in my book. Uh, attorney letters suck. You're gonna laugh because attorneys, if they went to your school, half of it is gonna be about, oh yeah, I went there, I loved my time there, blah 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 blah. Then the other half is gonna be about what they've done since they left your school and what they're currently doing at their law firm, and then two sentences about how you were a runner, which was doing absolutely nothing for their law firm. You know what I mean? So I should say it was absolutely nothing, but it's just like, okay, they were running for summer, but you can't tell me any other attributes other than that you went to law school here and you think this person is going to be a good fit.
I also really loved every now and again we'd get ones from judges or elected officials or something, and they'd be like this long. The whole letter would be this long.
There's been a handful of attorney letters that I've been very impressed with, and there's been a handful of elected officials letters that I've been impressed with. Because you're right, with elected officials, typically that relationship was with the parents, not so much with the students, unless the students worked on the campaign for that official. But I would tell you, if you worked on a campaign for an official and you want to get a letter from that campaign, you needed to get it from who's ever supervising the internees or the volunteers for the campaign, not from the person who was running, because they likely don't know you as well as that person. So that's why my general rule to people that I give about letters of recommendation is always to get them from people who are highly impressed with you, not so much people you think are going to be impressive to the committee.
How would you view an applicant that has a low GPA but a high LSAT?
That's a good portion of this pool. There's a term that we give those individuals. We call them splitters, right? Because we see them in both directions: low GPA, high LSAT, low LSAT, high GPA. So this is a little trick that I give to people who are splitters. I stole this from another colleague, so I can't trademark this formula, but I use it quite
It's
often.
not stealing. We share. We share.
So every law school is going to post their quartiles, right? 20th, 25th, 50th, and 75th percentiles in LSAT and GPA. So how you want to look at that is, where do my numbers fall? Do they fall within the range, right? So do you have one or both numbers at or above the medians? So if you have an LSAT that is in a 25th percentile and a GPA before the above the 50th percentile, you're probably going to be viable in that pool, right? But if you have an LSAT and GPA that both are well below the 25th percentiles, you may not, based off in your credentials, just only, I'm not talking about anything else in the file, may not be viable in the pool. And I often share with people, and when you're looking at your credentials, the number one factor that's going to drive that decision, a lot of people think the higher my LSAT, the better my chances. As my friend who's in the Navy will say, negative ghostwriter. Actually, in my opinion, the stronger your GPA, the better your chances. Because we know GPA is a lot of hard work, and some people just test well. And then you're also dealing with people who have multiple test scores, and we're typically taking the highest. So, like, I see people with extreme splits: 162, 2.72. So how I would look at that 2.72 is, what is that 2.72 in? If it's in something like political science, criminal justice, communications, you know, that 2.72 doesn't look that good. But if it's something like an engineering or chemistry, pretty rigorous major, I may look at that 2.2 differently. But I'm going to look more closely at how did they get to that 2.72. So I'm going to look at the grade trends across the 3 to 5 years that this individual was in school. Did they struggle at the beginning? Did they struggle at the end? Let me tell you, a upward trending GPA looks more positive than a downward trending GPA. So if I had someone who started off very slow freshman and sophomore year because they just wasn't ready, who had like a 1.9 freshman year, but ended up graduating last semester, last couple semesters had over 3.7. But because I had that 1.9 and cumulative is a 2.72, that's a different story than someone who started off with a 3.75 and ended up with a 2.72. But what also helps us understand those grades is if you are adding an addendum to your file to tell the story, because we don't know what happened unless you tell us. And we do recognize that life happens. People get ill, people break up, and yes, breakups impact GPAs. People get depressed. Some people, parents get divorced, and now they got to pay the bill. Now they got to work, and they never had to work. And now they're balancing these things. All of that stuff makes a difference on how we're going to evaluate those grades. So if you are someone who have split, and you retaken the LSAT multiple time, or you had to retake classes, or you started off poorly, or whatever it is, you have to tell your story in an addendum, not in your personal statement, but in an addendum about your academic performance or your LSAT performance. And I will tell you to be very careful when you write that, because you don't want to sound like you are making a whole bunch of excuses. You want to actually just lay it out, state the facts, what happened, and how you corrected the behavior, and how you moved forward at the end of the day.
That is excellent advice. I can't tell you how many personal statements that I read that had what should have absolutely been in an addendum taken up a bunch of space.
Mm-hmm.
I wish
Personal statements are prime real estate. Mm-hmm. So here in Kentucky, the 3 law schools, we partner together. Every year we hit the road together, and we go to almost every college and university in Kentucky, and we do these things called Kentucky Law School panels. So one year I don't know how we ended up on this analogy. We refer to law school applications as an ice cream cone. So you have the cone itself, the ice cream, and then you have the sprinkle. So most of the time you're going to get ice cream because you want ice cream, right? Not so much the cone or the sprinkles, right? So the ice cream cone itself is like the basics of the application. So whether it's a sugar cone, waffle cone, whatever, right? So the application, itself. Your ice cream is all the stuff, your addendums, your LSAT, your GPA, your personal statement. The sprinkles is all the extracurricular stuff. So your resume, your internships, and all that type of stuff like that. And one thing you know about sprinkles is that not everybody requires sprinkles to make the ice cream good. So that should tell you something about how we look at, how we look at resumes and things of that nature, right? So a lot of people think because they were involved in everything and did all these internships that they're a better candidate. But in actuality, they may not be, because they were so busy with everything else, they couldn't really focus on their academics at hand. So make sure you are stacking your cone with really good, high quality ice cream. And then maybe you have a few sprinkles to throw on top.
I love that. I'm a big fan of ice cream. I'm also a big fan of sprinkles, so I'm not sure if it works quite that well for me specifically. But I love it. I love it.
Well, you can fudge, strawberry toppings, whatever it may be.
I like all of the little add-ins. That's what I want all the time. So we are sort of coming towards the end of our time, but I did want to ask you, and this is my favorite question to ask anyone that works in law school admissions. If you could tell future applicants one thing, just one thing, what would it be?
one thing about
the application process, law school, it is, I left abroad for a reason.
there's
One
so many
thing.
one things I would like to tell. I would say throw out the rankings. It's a good place to start your law school search by looking at rankings. I think the things that outweigh rankings is how do I fit? Fit is so important. Um, Do you like the people? Can you see yourself being there for 3 years? Is the building aesthetically pleasing? If offered a job in this state, will I stay? Those things are all, to me, more important than the rankings. Because if you don't enjoy your law school experience, and law school can be, depending on you, 3 long, miserable years. If you don't enjoy it at the end of the day, you're going to question why you went into all this debt for this degree, and you're not going to enjoy your journey in the profession. So I would focus on fit. And you'd definitely be cognizant of bar passage rates and job placement rates. But if you look at the rankings, there are some schools with very, very strong bar and job placement rates and maybe ranked 70. So what that should tell you, you can still get a quality legal education that's not from a T20 or a T10 law school. So, and I want to give one more piece of advice. Do not feel defeated if you do not get admitted the first time around. Just means you may need to retool or look more broadly at the places in which you are applying to.
I love that. Thank you so, so much. This has been wonderful. It's always good to see your face, and I love to get that I get to see you at my job now. So if you guys watching enjoyed this video, don't forget to like and subscribe or rate and review. And then if you have a friend that is starting the application process or something along those lines, and you think they might find this helpful, share it with a friend.